Good afternoon, everyone. We are in Deuteronomy chapter 24. As we proceed in this chapter, I think a couple of things should be said up front. We are approaching the specific laws of the land of Israel, the land that God is giving them as a heritage. As I had mentioned many times before, God's land, God's rules. This is how God wants them to live in the land. Now, obviously, there are principles that demonstrate to us the character of God, but the specific details of these rules, and if you want, calling it laws, are actually meant for the people in the land. And so we should not just import the details, import the rules into our 21st century life. Else, we would have a lot of confusion, a lot of conflict, a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of ingenuity of applying things like that. So I just want to say that up front so that none of us should assume that these can be applied to any culture apart from them in the land. And if you look carefully in the words that is being said, it is a very cultural, very specific in their situation, and more so as they approach the taking of the promised land. And so I just want to uh, give us a fair warning not to just blindly import the instructions. So let's begin in verse 1. Now, we have some challenges in the translation, obviously. Whenever we read text which we find it to be sounding a bit strange, generally it's probably a challenge in the translation. So it says this: when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, which we need to define, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. So let's begin by deliberating in some of these texts. The words are important. So it says, when a man takes a woman. Now, understand in the old days, just like in the Chinese context, they don't have the word called wife or husband. She is a woman to a man, and the man is a man to a woman. Now, of course, in modern day terms, we would use the idea or the words in English called husband and wife. Now, the second idea is she marries her. Now, this word here is Baal, right? Baal. Baal means to marry, to possess, to own, uh, to be Lord over her. And this is a concept of ancient Hebrew marriage. And so when a man takes a woman and becomes Lord to her, that would be a good way of looking at it. And do not be apprehensive when this word Baal is used. The word Baal doesn't only mean the pagan god. It literally means someone who is going to be Lord, someone who is going to be the husband, someone who is going to be a master. And so in the old days, you find that when a woman is married to a man, the woman is subject to the man as one, as a lord to a woman, a master to a woman. And that is the common understanding. And so the word here marries literally means to be a Baal over her. And then it happens. This word it happens. Uh, it it happens or it came to pass, right? It came to pass that she does not find favor. This word favor is grace, and is always in the eyes of the beholder. So understand this. Why is she not finding grace in his eyes? Now, in the entire Hebrew Bible, you would find that finding grace or finding favor in the eyes of someone of authority, for example, Esther and the king, for example, Noah and God in Genesis chapter 6. What happens when Esther finds favor in the eyes of the king? She can approach the king. What happens when Noah found favor in the eyes of God? Well, God extended a rescue plan for him and his family. And so, if this woman does not find grace in the eyes of the man, and the idea here is the reason being that he has found, or when he has found, now this word, some uncleanness in her, is better expressed as some indecency, some improper behavior, right? Improper behavior. What else can we say? Some shame. And the rule is this: if she has found this in her, the idea here of in her, or with her, uh, and it's to do with the woman, and he makes a decision because he doesn't want her anymore. And so he writes her, or writes to her, a letter of divorce. Now, a letter of divorce, the idea of divorce comes from the word karat. It is to cut apart. To cut apart. To cut apart the bond between the man and the woman. And so there is a letter that he will write, and the letter will state the date of when this cutting apart is to be taking place, and he gives into her hand. And this is always the visual, right? He writes it and he puts it into her hand and then sends her out. Now, the idea of sending, so whenever you see sending her away, this is literally putting her out, putting out, sending her out, or how should we say, dismissing her, let her go. I think that would be a good way, out of his house. And that tells us that whenever a marriage takes place of a man and a woman, the tent or the home belongs to him. And so she is now being sent out, being dismissed, being put out of his house. And that's the idea of the English word divorce. But it literally gives us the connotation of formally cutting apart that, I would say, the marriage bond in that sense. Now, what happened really is something which we are not terribly clear. Something that he has seen that he is not happy with, and it's beyond happy, I guess. It is something that is really repulsive to him, and the text doesn't really say exactly what, but by inference, right? Uncleanness would be something indecent, something improper that she had done, something shameful that she had done. Now, what does that mean? That could mean many things. She could come back one day and she was pregnant, but not by him. or she may have been doing something which he can't prove yet, but it still says that he is not happy with whatever has transpired. And so it would have been something that she had done, may or may not have been evidenced. But as the Lord of the marriage, he has no favor or no grace extended to her. And so she would not be able to live in peace in that situation. And so the right thing to do was that he writes, and this is formal. It's not just mere saying it 3 times, I divorce you. The rule here is that there has to be fairness, that the woman would be able to marry again. And so the certificate of divorce, or the letter of cutting apart that relationship, is now in her hands. That means she can marry another man. And that is being fair, because in the days of old, a woman always needs a man to take care of her. And so she now can go and say she is no longer married to man A. She is now a free woman, and that's what it means. It's in her hand. She can evidence that she is a free woman now. And he no longer wants her in the house or in the home, and she goes out. Now, the second part is interesting. When she leaves the house, and then she goes and becomes another man's wife. Now, the word here literally means uh, she becomes, well, I guess she becomes uh, to another man. She becomes, or she come to pass, or she becomes another man. Now, the wife is implied. That's why it's in italic. But it does mean that she goes and becomes subject to the other man. The other man becomes her Baal, like here, right? Now, we're talking about uh, the latter man, the man that is after, the man that comes at the back, the man that is in the last. I think that would be a good word. Now, if the last, again, I don't like the word husband, I like the word man. And a man uh, hates her, finds her, how should we say, uh, turns him away. I think that would be a good word. Turns him away from her. Now, this idea of turn him away from her literally says that there is also no favor. For some reason, the man just don't like her. And then he writes her a certificate of divorce. Now, notice this is another instance of a letter of cutting apart, right? Cutting apart. So let me just put it here. Cutting apart. Please don't read these words in modern English. And then puts it in her hands, which means that now she is a free woman, and sends her out of his house. Exactly the same that happened to the first husband. Or, this is a big or if the last husband dies, who took her as his woman. Now, this means that she would have buried him. Yeah, she buried him. He dies and she buries him. And that means that this is an or. She's also free in this case, because there is no more man in her life. So one is with a certificate of cutting apart here. Two is he died and she becomes free again. So now let's look at verse 4. Now, verse 4 literally tells us this. Verse 4 says that the former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she had been defiled, for that is an abomination before the Lord. You shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Notice it's about the land, right? It's about the land, which tells us that the details here applies to the land. And so don't take this as any house. It's about the land. So let's look at verse 4. The former husband, the word former here means the first man. The first man who, this word divorced her, is the word sent away. Now you need to understand the concept. This word divorce is to cut apart. This word divorce, translated as divorce, literally means sends her out of his house. So this action of sending her out of his house is this word here, except that the English has decided to use the English word divorce. And now so we get confused. This is divorce, and they are two different Hebrew words. Now the focus is he must not take her back to be his woman. Right? It is very important. After she had made herself unclean, made herself unclean. So the idea of defile, right? She has contaminated herself. She has made herself unclean. She has defiled herself. And so in that sense, is no longer acceptable in a marriage to the first husband, the first man. And it is considered an abomination, something that is disgusting to the face of God. Now, this in itself, we should be able to understand that the principle here is that when a woman goes to another man and then coming back to the first man, in a human marriage, is declared as disgusting in the eyes of God, disgusting before God. It must not happen in the eyes of God. And so if you think of it this way, this is to enforce something very strict. And this one here is to enforce strictness because it symbolizes God and Israel. And so the symbol of the relationship of God and Israel is seen in this text, that God as the first husband is not gonna take you back. Now that is the threat. So the enforcing of the strictness is a threat. Now obviously God had in mind at the end of the day, in Jeremiah chapter 3, God warned Israel and warned Judah, the northern and southern. And finally, God wrote a bill of separation to the northern kingdom. But yet God called them to repent. All right, to repent. And then it itself becomes uh, a series of imagery of Deuteronomy 24. When God sent Israel, wrote a bill of divorce, one of the things that did not happen in Jeremiah chapter 3 was God did not send her out of the house. God merely gave the bill of divorce without sending her away. So the entirety was not in completion in that sense. And so God gave Israel a chance to repent. And that was the picture in Jeremiah chapter 3. But in here, we must bear in mind that the woman was given a letter of separation put in her hand to give her justice so that she is now a free woman and she can marry again. And she leaves the original house of the husband. And so this is important because if the man does that, then it will be sin. It is not about a woman coming back, but if the man does it, the man, you is the man, will bring sin onto the land, right? Onto the land. Now, understand this. This is about sin onto the land. This is not something grievous that somebody has to die for it. It's about the land. If it wasn't about the land, then perhaps that is okay because it's got nothing to do with this anymore. Now, I'll leave this with you because this is something for us to consider that it has nothing to do with us today because it is very specifically tied to the land. And the bill of divorce is actually executed by the man, not by a court of law or anything else in the modern day. And so this in itself can take effect because that is how culturally they were in those days. Now, there are other laws that we will cover quickly. When a man has taken a new woman, when he has done that, he shall not go out to serve in the war or be charged with any of that business. Uh, the idea here is he needs to enjoy that relationship with the wife first. So he shall be free at home for 1 year and to take care of the wife whom he has taken. So this is good for both the husband and the wife because the reason why the woman married is also so that she can give birth to children, right? Verse 6. It says, no man shall take the lower or upper millstone in pledge, for he takes somebody's living in pledge. Now, it is important for us to think this way. This is about pledge. This is about lending money. Lending money. A pledge would be a guarantee. And you cannot take a person's lower or upper millstone. You know, when they grind wheat, there is a millstone on top and a millstone below. So we have an upper and a lower. And you can't take either because if you have taken it, either one, he can't live, he can't eat, he can't grind his mill. And so the principle here is be fair with the one whom you have lent money to. If a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away evil from among you. Another interesting expression here. So the idea of found, I guess you can say, if found means discovered, witnesses are there, right? Kidnapping means secretly stealing any of his brethren. Now, these are not children, by the way, so this is not kidnapping a child. It's kidnapping someone who is an adult in the clan of the children of Israel, which means their nation. Now, the word here is and. It means that if it does all of this, then there is a penalty. Now, what do you mean mistreat him? Now, the idea of mistreat is to be tyrannical, become very, not just bossy, but becomes a tyrant. Something like Genesis chapter 6, where the sons of Elohim, the sons of tyrant, just take the daughters of men as their wives. And so this is the idea of mistreatment. Now, this word is not or, this word is also and he sells him, makes money. And you can see this as slavery. And this is mistreating a life. That kidnapper, he is called the thief. The English word is kidnapper in the translation. It's called thief because he steals by stealth. He shall die. Why? Because when you mistreat and you or sell him, you make money from somebody else's life, you die. God says, you shall put away the evil, the ra, from among you. The word put away is to burn. It's literally when you burn something, it's gone. That is what this word means, to put away. All right. Verse 8. Verse 8 says, take heed, be very careful, be cautious. If we have an outbreak of leprosy, we would call this zarat. Zaraat. It is a skin disease and it's contagious that you must carefully observe and do according to all the priests, the Levites shall teach you. Leviticus, this is the book of Leviticus 13 and 14. Just as I commanded them, so you shall be guarding yourself to do it. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way you came out of Egypt. And when Miriam was questioning why Moses, her hand became leprous. There was a zaraat on her hand. So that is what God is reminding. Be very careful with this kind of skin disease. Verse 10. Verse 10 is about loaning, right? Loaning. When you lend your brother anything, it could be money, it could be clothing, it could be food. You shall not go into his house to get his guarantee. Don't go in and pick. Give him, how should we say, in Chinese, we say, give him face. It needs to have dignity. Respect the man, right? That would be a good way of expressing this. You shall stand outside patiently. The man whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. Let him decide what would be the pledge. If the man is poor, now this word poor means very, very poor, very humbled, very I would say very humbled. There's nothing much he has. You shall not keep his pledge overnight. What does that mean? Now, we may not be aware, but this word means the pledge here overnight would be his clothes. Because he has nothing to give you except the clothes off his back. You shall, in any case, return him when the sun goes down, because he will need it to sleep. He may sleep in his own garment, and he will bless you because you've been good to him. And it shall be tzedakah, righteousness to you before the Lord your God. God will be pleased because you have given him dignity. You have done the right thing, right? You have done the right thing. Verse 14. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy. Now, this word oppress, how should we say? You shall not do wrong. And the idea here is you should not exploit, or you shall not defraud. And I guess the Jewish thinking here is you shall not withhold. Meaning you can pay him the wages, but you don't want to pay him. And that is withholding. Because the hired servant needs some money. He is poor and needy, destitute. He needs to eat. One of your brethren of Israel, this would be of Israel, one of the aliens, in this case, would be Ger, a stranger who is in your land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages. And that is why this idea of withhold has to deal with wages. So it's literally not giving when you can, and not giving. And so do not let the sun go down on it. Deal with it. When the day is up, you have to give him because he is poor and he needs it. His heart has set on it. He has decisions to make with it for him to survive. Lest he cry out against you to God and it be sin to you. Now, this is interesting. This word means he cry out against you, means he has a complaint to God. And if that's the case, you have missed the mark. So, do you want to miss the mark? When you can do it, you must do it, and you should not hold it back. And so that it is seen to be fair, tzedakah, before God. 16. Now you would see this. Fathers shall not be put to death for their children. Now the idea of for their children literally means, how should we say? Because of their children, right? Nor shall children be put to death because of their fathers, right? Because. And then it clearly explains the principle here. A person shall be put to death for his own sin. Ezekiel 18. Go back and read Ezekiel 18. Ezekiel 18 is not a new thing. Ezekiel 18 is merely expressing Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 16. And so nobody is to be executed for the crimes that somebody else would have done. That in itself is God's principle, God's rules. And in so doing, one needs to be very mindful that justice is served when the one committing the crime is the one who is going to pay for the crime. Otherwise, all the gangsters and mob bosses with many of their little handlings below him would be substituting him to go to jail or to be executed. And so God's laws of justice means that the person who is charged with the crime beyond a shadow of doubt in the presence of 2 or 3 witnesses shall be put to death for what he has done and not for somebody else's work or somebody else's sin. Verse 17, you shall not pervert justice due to the stranger or fatherless. Now, what do you mean by pervert justice? Now, the idea of perverting justice literally means to stretch. That is what it means to pervert, to bend. Now, what does that mean in the idea of justice or judgment is this. You've heard the expression, do not bend the truth. Well, this phrase here is do not bend justice, do not bend judgment. Meaning, the people who are the weakest, who doesn't know very much, one would be the ger, the other would be the fatherless, who is the orphans, nor take a widow's garment as a pledge because she needs it. There's nothing more that she has. So the idea here is don't deal unrighteously with the widow, with the stranger, with the ger, with the orphans, with the poor, with the needy. Remember that you were a slave, right? Remember that you were a slave. In this case, a servant. You were a servant in Egypt. The Lord your God redeemed you from there. The idea of redeemed here is to return to original owner. And so they were owned. Their master was the Egyptians. Now the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt to the promised land and returned you to the original owner, who is Jehovah your God. Therefore, I command you to do this thing, so that you need to recognize that now that you're in your own land, you must now take care of those who are servants in your land. So now let us take a good look at this text. In verse 19 to verse 22, this is what is commonly called the law of gleaning, right? The law of gleaning. This idea tells us this. When you reap your harvest in your field, this is talking to the owner of a field. Because you can reap, you can harvest your own field. So this is talking about the owner. You are rich, you have land, you have harvest that you can do. And so what happens is that you forget, you, I guess you can say, you were oblivious. Oblivious. Why? Because there are so many stocks to cut, right? There's so many stalks to cut. And then you cut them and you left one. Let's say it's one. But the rest, it's all cut, right? It's all cut, except one. I'm just using a fictitious number. I'm just trying to explain the idea. What do you mean by forget a sheaf in the field? You've cut and then suddenly there's one sticking out there. You shall not go back to cut it. It shall be for the gare, right? It shall be for the gare. Understand this in the book of Ruth, in the field of Boaz. Ruth is a gare, and Ruth was able to cut the fatherless, the orphans, the widows, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. You want blessing? Take care of the stranger, the gare, the orphans, the fatherless, the widow, the manless, the woman without a man. Then these are the ones that they are to look after. The next expression is this: when you beat your olive trees. Now, this idea of beat your olive trees, it is to knock down. So, in effect, you're supposed to shake the tree, and so by using a big stick and you whack the tree will get the vibrations, and the olives will fall down. This is harvesting olives. They don't pluck one by one. You shall not go over the branches again. Now that is important. You shall not go after them again. It shall be for the gare, the fatherless, and the widow. Next expression. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, meaning you are harvesting, right? Harvesting grapes. You shall not glean. Now, the word glean literally means to deal with it. That's what it means by glean, right? You shall not deal with it after that. You shall not go and do it again. I guess that's what you can say. You shall not do it again. Do the harvesting again. Just let it be. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And the principle here is very clear. The principle is you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. You were a servant. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. This thing. What thing? To let a chance be before the gare, the orphans, and the widows, to pick or to harvest for themselves, to do work, so that they keep their dignity, that they are not beggars, because beggars would lose their dignity to beg from someone. And so God says, when the time comes, they also need to eat. But instead of you giving it to them, they are to work for it so that they will feel that they have done something to earn their keeps. Although these are the harvest and you have indirectly given part of your harvest to them, but they had worked for it and you paid them in kind. Now, this is the law of gleaning. The law of gleaning. And this is important because it is to give people, the poor, the weak, the the stranger, the orphans, the widows, dignity. And so we come to the end of our session today. And this chapter really tells us a lot about God's character. God wants the Israelites, those who has the ability, never to forget the poor, the needy. When you lend them money, what you should do. When you take a pledge, what you mustn't do. You must not be mishandling the situation. You must treat them with dignity. You must give back their clothes because they need to survive. If they had everything, then they won't need to borrow from you. Now, there are all kinds of situations when you need to borrow, right? When you are insufficient of your funds, when you have not enough, but also when you have nothing. And so the poor, the weak, the needy, the orphans, the widows, the ger has no land, so he can't go and do anything. He has to work for his meal. And so that is really to take care of the less fortunate. So in principle, take care of the less fortunate. Be fair to them, the tzedakah, and God will bless the hand who takes care of these people. The law of gleaning, when you're in the land, when you are harvesting, make sure that others, the poor, the weak, the needy, the ger, the orphans, the widows, they have a chance with their dignity to eat and survive in the land, because God doesn't want anyone to be mistreated in the land. It's the land that God gave them, and all must be blessed either directly or through the hand of the rich who has the ability to do so. And with this, we come to the end of our session tonight.